Hey everybody, Greg here. At the introduction here to the video, I wanted to explain that the KEF speakers that were being evaluated as part of this comparison were not hooked up correctly, and that's explained in detail at the end of the video, but that's why they sounded a little bit muted, and so I really didn't go into depth in terms of comparing them until the end. I took a good listen to them when they were hooked up properly, but it's a little quirky the way the speaker wires connect to the back. So, hey everybody, Greg here, and this is a short video evaluating three different bookshelf speakers that have a woofer driver that's measured at about 5 inches. If you measure the cone from kind of left to right, the width of the foam, it's about 4 inches, just to give you an idea of the size. And we have Sony's on the top, Klipsch in the middle, and some KEF speakers at the bottom. To talk a little bit about the physical characteristics of these speakers, let me touch on that before I get started looking at the, examining the audio performance. The Sony's, I'm going to take my ring off here so I don't scratch the speaker cabinet. The Sony's have these surface-mounted speaker connectors, and it's the 5-way connector with a ported design in the back. It's nice. If you're going to be putting this close to a wall, that could be a problem because of the porting, and also because these wires are going to stick out. You may want to, instead of using banana plugs, you could use just some nice soldered speaker wire, and because it's a 5-way connector, you can just put the wire in that way, so you get the speaker a little closer to the wall. Now, the same is true for the Klipsch's here. Let me show you the connection there, but what's nice is it's recessed a little bit. So if you do use just the speaker wire, you can have a much closer, closer positioning to a wall or in a bookshelf for the bookshelf speaker. It's ported in the back. Instead of a round port, it has sort of this oblong port. I don't know if you can see that there. And then a really nice hook. Very solid. It's plastic, but very solid hook on the back, so you could, put a screw in the wall and then have these wall mounted, which I might look at doing that actually. So finally here on the bottom, below the Klipsch's, are the KEF's, and they actually have a pair. You'll see the posts here. There's one measured LF and the top one is HF. And so you could, pass the crossover on to the next speaker. I presume LF stands for low frequency. I've not looked into that closely. There's also some knobs on the back that say link. You can turn those and link that. So I'd have to look into that. That's something I'd not seen before. Right now I'm not really concerned in going into too much depth into that, but there's also this metal bracket on the back of the KEF's, and it sticks out quite a ways. It's a little bit awkward there, so unless you're going to use the wall mount, you may not want that. Also, if you do indeed use the wall mount and you set this on a screw and it's being held to the wall, you'd want some kind of a rubber bushing or foam or something on the back of here to make sure the speaker doesn't swing back. And certainly the speaker cables stick out further than this mounting bracket because these aren't really recessed. And so the mounting bracket is really kind of useless unless you go in at an angle to connect your speaker wires. In situations like that, I like to use soldered ends on the speaker wires. They fit nicely in there. So I'm going to put this tower back together. I chose to put the speakers in this order because you may not have noticed quite the dimensions, but the KEF's, the speaker cabinet, is relatively narrow, a little bit wider than the Klipsch, but it's relatively narrow, but it goes back the furthest. Okay, so the KEF's seem to have more volume in the cabinet. And then there is the Klipsch here in the middle. The Sony has the least volume, the least space in the speaker cabinet, and so it only goes back maybe 6-7 inches, whereas the others go back further. And that's kind of nice because it would let you have essentially a larger speaker enclosure without going wide. And that's a situation, for me at least, I have a desk set up where I don't even want to go to like a 6-inch, 6¼ inch woofer design, because those speaker enclosures, those cabinets are that much bigger, taking up that much room, more room on the desk. And I'm not sure if I really want to do wall mounted. Anyway, so that's just a little bit about the physical characteristics of the speakers. Some of the KEF speakers do not come with a grill, like the 350s, for example, the Q350s. Let me just mention, all of these speakers do have a grill option. The Sonys have these, you've probably seen this design before, little plastic posts that come off of the grill, and you push that into holes on the front of the speaker. The KEF design is quite nice. Instead of there being kind of larger plastic posts, they're more like pins, a little bit smaller pins, and that goes in. And you'll notice the KEF design also has the woofer drivers on the top and the tweeters on the bottom. I presume, I'm not sure what the advantage of that would be. Maybe you'd be less likely to be off axis if the speaker was sitting on a desk, because that's going to, or on a bookshelf, because it's going to bring the tweeter up to be maybe ear listening level. I don't know. What's cool about the Klipsch speakers is that they have a magnetic mountable grill. And I just kind of like that. I like that you just kind of set it there and it holds in place. Because sometimes like forcing the grills off of different speakers can feel like you're about to break something. So anyway, enough about the physical design. And I've listened to these speakers already a little bit. I used music that's just popular music that people would recognize. I don't want to use that in my video in this testing that I'm going to do now, because YouTube will flag the video as containing copyrighted material, a lot of it. Even though it's just 3 seconds here, 2 seconds there of some different songs, there are going to be, 20 people claiming copyright ownership of this video, and it's just going to be a mess. So I'm going to use some of my own music that I put together using GarageBand. It's good enough to do a test like this. And I'm going to bring out my audio frequency analyzer so you can get a visual of what's happening with these speakers. You notice on the table behind me, there's an SDS 12-inch subwoofer. I'm not going to be using that right now in the test. I might kick it in later, but we'll see. And then the receiver here that I'm using for my amp is an Onkyo TX-NR777. It's kind of the highest model of that NR line before you get into the RZ line of theater receivers that Onkyo has. This is also a theater receiver. And the only reason I got this is because the setup where I'm going to be using this one, I want to be able to convert from whatever kind of optical audio input I'm putting into it, like from a TV, whether it's 2-channel, 5.1, whatever, I want it to be able to play that. If you go with any of the receivers that are a 2-channel audio, as much as I know, the ones I've tried, those may have an optical input, but it can't handle a 5.1 audio. So if you have, let's say, an Apple TV, you're going to play Hulu, it's going to work great. As soon as you switch over to Netflix, because they have a different optical audio out, I think it's 5.1, it seems to be, then you'll get static on some receivers. So to be able to deal with that, you get one of these receivers. And the other benefit is these are really nice receivers. They're THX certified. Their RZ line has even better componentry in it, but they're all good. Lots of amperage, lots of headroom available. When you use these home theater receivers, you'll want to either use all channel stereo or direct, the direct mode. There are other modes in here of trying to, even from a 2-channel stereo, create a surround sound experience, but those things just to me don't sound that great. Anyway, that's a little bit about the hardware, what I'm using for the test. I've got my speaker switch box here. I'm going to sit down and get started. So I'm going to move the camera so you can, I'll be talking, you can see me talking about what we're listening to and showing you that spectrum analyzer. Let's get started. All right, so we're ready to do the speaker comparison. I'll start by playing from the KEFs, the speakers on the bottom. Let me give you an idea of the background sound in the room. Looks pretty much like, clean pink noise, but there aren't any hums or odd things going on in the background, which is helpful. I don't hear anything and also don't see it on the audio analyzer. And what I'll be using to test the speakers are some songs that I composed using GarageBand on the iPad. A lot of different instrumentals. These are many times putting together some different tracks and then performing some of the song on my own, some of the tracks on my own. So if you want to hear these songs on your own system, or if you're interested, you can go to aboutgregjohnson.com/music, and you will find these tracks listed there. The names are basically the year, month, day, and the time, and then the name of the song. So this first one is called Skate, and it's a soundtrack that I created for a high-speed video, super slow motion video of somebody skateboarding. And so here it is on the KEFs. Interesting. Okay, let's jump up to the Klipsch's. One thing you'll notice is that it probably will come through in this video. Klipsch's are a lot more efficient, I think. You give them the same amount of power and they just make a lot more sound with it. So they dig a little deeper too. And let's go to the Sonys then. Let's go rewind that. Rewind. That dates me a little bit, doesn't it? Okay, so I would say the Klipsch's went out there. The Sonys always do well in that mid to high frequency range, but they're missing some of the fullness that is in there. All right, let's jump ahead. This next song is from September 10th, 2017. The title is Chill. I'm going to jump down to the KEFs. Sometimes the KEFs sound a little dry to me, a little muffled, a little bit muted. And like that percussion sound right there, it's almost like somebody built a speaker using like cardboard or paper cups or something. Yeah, that's a perfect comparison right there of the KEFs versus the Klipsch's, because that thing I was saying that sounded like a speaker made in a cardboard box or whatever, and it sounded like a tiny drum that somebody was hitting or something. You play that on the Klipsch's and it sounds like a different instrument altogether. So it's going to come in here in a few seconds. Yeah. Now you hear that's a drum. It's barely even coming through on the KEFs. And now drop to the, or go up to the Sonys here. You can hear it, but it's not as full as the Klipsch sound there. I'm just going to go back to that percussion. Klipsch's are really quite nice there. You know, if I had to pick one, I really like the Sonys, but the Klipsch's go a little deeper, maybe they're fuller, so I might go with the Klipsch's. As it is, from what I've heard so far, I'm probably going to combine those two. This is a track called Dirt Trail. It's from September 17th, 2017. Here's a perfect example of something. I want to talk about this for a minute. I'm comparing the Klipsch's and the Sonys, having listened to them, to all three pairs of speakers for quite a bit. I'm settling in on the Klipsch's and Sonys being, I think, unarguably better at many things. So anyway, the point I'm going to make here, though, is that in this song that I'm playing right now, if you go between the Klipsch and the Sony, you'll hear that they perform well at doing different things. And there's a moment at which, if you're pushing the buttons, you might have both pairs playing at the same time. When that happens, in fact, if you want, you can go ahead and turn both speakers on at the same time and play the song. You will find it is just much more full sounding. You take away the Sonys, or vice versa, have the Sonys and then take away the Klipsch's, you can really start to hear what each speaker pair is adding to the sound, what it's reproducing well. The Klipsch's just dig much deeper. But by themselves, they miss that brightness in the high frequencies that the Sonys definitely have. The Sonys just break it open. It's just really good imaging with those Sonys. The Sonys by themselves doing great at those higher frequencies, but not quite going down as deep. So the Klipsch speakers add some warmth and depth to it. And if I just go to the Kefs for a minute, there's a certain tone that's coming through really well with the Kefs, but then the rest of it sounds a little bit thin and muted. So just going to jump ahead here. Yeah, so a lot of times I think people go into comparing speakers hoping to find the best pair of speakers, when it may be that if you combine two pairs of speakers, you'll get everything you want, And in this case, I would say the Klipsch's, the Klipsch speakers, and the Sony speakers do real well together. Now here's an example. This is a song that's from September 18th, 2017. The title is Chimes. And it's a perfect example of how switching between the Sonys and the Klipsch's, you won't really notice a difference. And if you play all four speakers, both pairs, it doesn't sound better, doesn't sound different. So for those notes, for those frequencies, let me take a look at what they are. You can see the chords of chimes. So I went ahead and paused it there so we can take a look at that. But as a person would be, let's say, playing this on a keyboard, it's probably not real chimes. I composed it, so whatever was sampled originally. You notice, just like fingers on a keyboard, are these peaks. So those are the actual chords of chimes. And those frequencies that the Klipsch and Sony speakers are just doing really, really well on, and that you can't even hear a difference, tonally, volume, anything. To me, they're identical in that frequency for those instruments. It looks like it's from about 300 hertz up to sort of 4,000, so 4 kilohertz, in that range. And it's that range that I would say the Sonys do real well. If it's a guitar, vocals in that range, the Sonys do real well. And I'll keep playing because there are certain points at which you can hear a difference between the Sonys and the Klipsch speakers. And the Klipsch sound better, they sound fuller and warmer in those lower frequencies. So depending on the music and the instrument. I'm going to skip to the next song. This is Plucked Strings, called, the title is China Rain. It's from September 18th, 2017. That's the Sonys. The Sonys adding them to the Klipsches, taking them away. It's imperceptible, but if you have the Sonys and you take the Klipsch away, you notice some of the low end dropping out.
Well, this here is a little song.
Skip that. Huh. At the beginning of this one, this is Space Rap, September 21, 2017. There's a sound that you can sort of hear the high end of it, but when I switch over to the Klipsch speakers and play that, it's just a little bit deeper at the beginning of that. And with a subwoofer, it shakes the building. A very low frequency there. I'm going to jump ahead, switch between the Klipsch and the Sonys. And you know what it would be like is the Klipsch speakers are as if you went to an equalizer and started boosting like around 100, maybe between 70 and 100. They just have a more stronger presence in that frequency range, and they add some warmth in that area. I'm just going to jump ahead. This next one is Pixie March from September 21st, 2017. Switching now to the Klipsch and the Sonys. And there's an example. I'm going to take a look at the frequency. We're now on the Sonys. Yeah, a lot of activity in that kind of 500 to 2K range. And the Sonys love that. They do that really well. The Klipsch do well with that as well. Not to leave the Kefs totally out, but just they're not quite as full. It's almost like something's wrong with them. You know, I don't know what the deal is, but okay. Back to the Klipsch. Let's go to the next song. This one is from September 21st, 2017. It's called Space Warble. Now, that's an example where the Sonys kind of pull out ahead of the Klipsch speakers in creating this spacious sound when that higher frequency synthesizer comes in. It just does really well with that. The Sonys. All right, jumping ahead. This is about 15-second long clip. It's called Assembly Line. It's from also September 21st, 2017. Not really much going on there. Okay. That's the Sonys. You might be able to tell with Klipsch speakers, there's a lot more of that deep bass in there. I'm going to pull up the analyzer again. And let's go back to the beginning. And then we'll switch to the Sonys and go back. And it'll be a slightly different pattern probably. I think you can even see that there, that the Sonys were kind of coming up in this area. Okay, and this next one is Southland, also September 21st, 2017. Let's go to the Sonys. Kind of a mix of some plucked strings, sort of an Asian sounding, with this initial guitar and something like a French horn in there. So that's on the Sonys. Klipsch doing better with some lower bass drums there. The Sonys doing better with the sound stage and the brightness of it. If anything, I would say that Klipsch speakers could possibly sound a little bit muddy and not so precise, almost like a little bit of a rumble there at times to achieve that bass. You know, it's interesting. It's almost as if, let's say they were identical speakers, but the Sonys are as if you kind of cranked up the treble a little bit. The Klipsch speakers are as if you turned up the bass a little bit. You know, when you turn it up too much, it just doesn't sound good anymore. So a person would want to be careful with those Klipsch speakers. And in any music that was from the studio, recorded with just too much of that over-modulated bass in there, it's not going to sound good on anything. But yeah, it's not going to sound good on each Klipsch because they're already, that's kind of a weakness of theirs, would be they do great at bringing up the bass in a song where that's needed, but they might not perform well if there's already too much bass there to begin with. And this song is Set Free. It's from November 2nd of 2017. So there's the Klipsch, and now the Sony. Interesting. I think there's something I'm hearing there on the Sonys that I don't hear on the Klipsch. Yeah, it's more pronounced in the Sonys. There's a little echoing off to the sides the Sonys are able to do. And there's an example where if the Klipsches are performing well at a certain part of the song, the lower frequencies in this case, and then the Sonys are creating something you just don't even hear really, or at least not as pronounced as with the Klipsch, combining the two speakers really creates something amazing that you're not going to hear in any other speaker because, you know, we're talking about two speakers combined. And so, again, there may not be one speaker that does everything, but if two speakers perform pretty well in different areas. And, you know, going back to what I was saying earlier, that the Klipsch sound like somebody turned up the bass a little bit. The Sony sound like somebody cranked the treble, which I sometimes like to do if they're speakers that don't perform well with that high frequency sound. But that is what loudness is. Have you ever, you know, pushed the loudness button or gotten an equalizer and you kind of boost the bass and boost the treble a little bit? Just, you know, I think the reason we boost the bass is because a lot of speakers don't really have large drivers in them. and you want to do as much as you can to make them sound like they have more bass to them. And the reason we boost the treble is because our hearing, maybe tapers off a little bit in those higher frequencies, or they get absorbed by our surroundings. Carpet on the floor here, you saw the couches with absorbing some sound. Maybe we're off axis, so we need to boost the treble a little bit, So I think it's smart if that is in fact the case, if what Sony did was somehow brighten up the sound. That's smart, because you're not always going to be sitting exactly in the middle, with the speakers raised up to the ear level and, everything's perfect. That doesn't happen. So if you can kind of give it this slightly unnatural boost to the treble, it's going to sound better. And with the Klipsch having the nice port in the back and the way they've delivered that low frequency sound, almost unnatural, but there again, it's a small speaker. Maybe you don't have it placed on the floor or in an ideal location to get that lower frequency delivered to the listener. Maybe you're across the room. By the time you get across the room, you're not going to feel the bass as much. You're not going to hear those high frequencies as much. So that combination, that pairing of the Sony and Klipsch speakers, I think works pretty well. And I'm going to jump to a couple more songs here and then kind of wrap things up. This song is Starsight, and it was from November 4th of 2017. It's another song where the Sonys do real well, the Klipsch speakers do really well, but each in their own way, and when you combine them, amazing. And just to, not to neglect the Kefs, I'll go back to them, and I've got to say, I listen to the 350s and hear the 100s. They may be more designed for like classical music and piano and guitar and some vocals, and not designed for some guy sitting in his living room throwing some song tracks together using GarageBand. So don't want to totally diss the Kefs. Now that sounds pretty nice right there on the Kefs. Let's see what frequency that is. Because my theory is that they must be...
I don't understand. Is that they must be?
They must be, but why is it listening to me? I didn't say, hey Siri. Oh, wow. These computers just have a mind of their own, don't they? Okay, let's go back. Yeah, that's sort of 500 to 2K. But see, I know from playing this before that that's what that's supposed to sound like. It's supposed to sound like these little plucked string instruments in an echoey hall. And so the Kefs do perfect with that, because that's what the Kefs sound like anyway. So I hear that and I think that sounds really good. And I feel really bad about it because the Kefs have good build. They're a good, reputable company. They look nice. In the back there are multiple posts for hookups. I mean, and I'm guessing like at a high volume in a huge room, if you have these Kefs set up and you're listening to piano, they probably sound pretty good, and if you're not comparing them to something, you kind of get used to speakers that you're listening to, and then they start to sound okay. So, but it's just like when I switch over to the Klipsch speakers, there's just like a whole bunch of other stuff that comes into the sound stage. And not just like the primary instruments that are being played, but sort of like the tones and the shape of it, the other subtle aspects like that. I'm going to switch over to the Sonys. Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I could keep going, but I don't want to take up your time. So, um, basically, that if there were a speaker, and there actually are speakers like this, but if there were a speaker that had like multiple really tight, 5-inch woofers, a couple of them, and then a really nice, you know, dome tweeter, and then a horn kind of dispersion tweeter, and then a super tweeter. If there was a speaker like that, it would sound great. Well, now there is. It's the Klipsch and the Sonys combined into one little tower like that, and they really perform well. This last song is Logistics, November 9th, 2017. Let's just jump ahead here. There's an example where the Sonys start to sound a little papery. You hear that percussion? Now I'm going to switch over to the Klipsch. Now both. Wow. Yeah, but there's some harmonics that happen. If you're playing a percussion instrument, let's say a little drum, and you hit it, but then something else, resonates with it. And with the Klipsch speakers, they go deep enough, a little bit deeper, that they bring in that warmth, they bring in that depth that isn't the primary sound of that instrument. It's just like the other resonating tones off of it. And the Sonys do really well with the spatial separation and the precision and the brightness and all that. There's certain times where the Klipsch speakers kind of pull ahead of the Sonys in that range. But in general, that's what it is. So, well, hey, it's been a little while, so I'm going to wrap this up, but I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, any suggestions for further product reviews, speaker reviews, whatever. And if you wanted to use some of this music that I was playing to demo some speakers, or do your own demo, get the Klipsch speakers, get the Sony speakers. I'll be putting the model numbers there at the beginning. In fact, why don't I just, since I'm mentioning it, I'll just read it out here. Get those model numbers up for you. I'm at 1% battery, so I better do it quick. Here we go. So it's the Sony SSC S5 bookshelf speakers, and for the Klipsch it was the RB, and there it went. Let me go off to my other device here, so I want to read that off to you. But it was the similar design in the Klipsch line here. I'm going to bring it up. So yeah, the Sonys are, the price on those fluctuates. It can sometimes be around $148, then it goes down to $118, so roughly $120 to $150. Yeah, the Klipsch then, it's the RB-51 and then 2, like Mark II, but it's just, yeah, RB-51 and then a space 2 with 2 eyes, bookshelf speakers. And those, well, let me just read a little bit about the specs before I wrap up here. The Sonys are rated as reaching down to 53 hertz and going up to 50 kilohertz, 50,000 hertz. The Klipsch are rated as going from 50 to 24, plus or minus 3 dB. So, some of those lower frequencies that we're hearing maybe are 5, 6, 7 dB down, 10 dB down, but at least they're there. And the price on those Klipsch speakers, it's $180, so not that far off from what the Sonys are. And I think they're real comparable, and it may depend on your taste too. I can imagine some people saying that bass on the Klipsch sometimes could sound a little overmodulated, muddy, or whatever. And some people may like the brightness of the Sonys better. But if you combine them like I was doing today, I think you'd find that kind of an interesting result from that. So I wanted to append a little bit onto that small bookshelf speaker comparison video because during the test that you just saw, I had these KEF speakers plugged in and they were not performing well. They sounded kind of muted. They just weren't spectacular. And I was influenced by the fact that I had already done a test with these KEF 350s. That's a larger, kind of larger version of the smaller 100s, Q100s. These are the Q350s. And on the back, you can see there are these speaker wire posts, 5-way connector posts, just like most speakers have. And that's what most of the other speakers had that I was testing, although if we take a look at these Klipsch speakers here, and this is the larger, like 6-inch woofer version, you can see here it has 4 or 2 pairs of these 5-way mounting posts, which let you go ahead and patch into the bottom, patch into the top, and presumably that's for by wiring, by amp. You take out the little jumper there, and then you can have separate power going to each one. There's some people believe that sounds better. I was kind of finding this as a handy way to connect another pair of speakers. So I have the ELAX, a 6-ohm speaker, plugged into the Klipsch here, an 8-ohm speaker, and I really like the sound. I think they pair well. Those pair well. Anyway, so when I got to hooking up these KEF Q100s, on the back I saw what to me looked familiar, these 5-way speaker wire posts, and then this I had not seen, a little knob in the middle that says link, where I just assume like it links the two, sort of like what that metal jumper did with the Klipsch speakers. And so I went ahead and just kind of left them in their default position, assuming that both posts are equally connected or whatever. Then, just out of curiosity, I just wanted to know more about that little knob and if indeed the clockwise all the way in position, which is how they shipped, if that was the way they were supposed to be. And I got into looking at the user guide, which I'm going to show you here. And let me get away from those bright lights. And I found that, yeah, indeed, the setting for a single wire wiring is shown here. And you can see a bunch of different languages. Single wire wiring, and you want to turn them clockwise. And if you use the wired connection, you want to turn those counterclockwise and have them come all the way out. So, there is indeed that factor, right? And then on the very next page, let me bring that up. There's a diagram showing how these speakers are to be wired. So let me show you that. So here on the top, again, single wire connection, they're showing that needs to connect to the bottom posts. Even though, that knob that says link, I assume would link the posts and it wouldn't matter where you connect, but no, it does matter. And if you use the bi-wired connection, they're saying to turn to have the wires connected to, the top and bottom there. But anyway, so it seems that it makes a difference where those wires are connected. I did not have them connected to the bottom. I had them connected to the top. And so, I think that's one of those things it's maybe non-intuitive to a lot of people. It's not intuitive, and it's not something you see on all speakers. Don't have some little knob back there that says link, and many speakers don't even have multiple posts. So I think the average consumer is just going to hook them up, and 50-50 chance, you might get it right, you might get it wrong. So that's one of those deals where I would say, the manufacturer should really think about having a little peel-off sticker that says, please check the manual before connecting, or Otherwise, just tape off the top ones and just say, only to be used for double wired connections or whatever. You often see that on some printers. They'll have like a little plug in the ports in the back indicating, what each port is for, and there'll be tape over it or something. So anyway, long story short, the KEFs actually sound okay if you get the wires in the right posts there. I'm just going to go back to playing one of the songs I used in the demo. This one is Logistics from November 9th of 2017. Okay, so with the KEF speakers connected right now and the receiver in the direct mode, I'm going to go ahead and play a song that I played earlier in the video. Turn it up a little bit. And let me just turn around to hear this properly. Yeah, I would say, the KEFs connected properly. They have pretty good sound. Smooth, I would say, and no obvious issues going on there. Now, let me switch over. I don't want to go through the whole array of speakers, the Sonys I have in the other room, but I'll go ahead and connect up the Klipsch speakers. We'll listen again, get a little bit of an impression, and then close out the video. So hold on just a sec. Okay, so there's a little bit of a plain background noise going on here, but once that stops, I'll get these Klipsch going, and that'll be a pretty fair comparison. As far as placement, this obviously isn't ideal. The speakers are pretty close together. I'd like to be comparing them in kind of a large room, have them on some stands, but this is kind of a real-world example, real-world setup here. So anyway, let's go ahead and turn on that music here. Now, if the sorry to be moving the camera a lot on you, I can tell pretty quickly, and I've listened to the Klipsch a lot and being reminded just now of their sound, that while the KEF speakers sound real smooth and present the music quite well, and depending on preference, some people may say they really like them better, but I tend to like the Klipsch speakers better. They, again, throw that sound stage out further. I like that. They have a real clear and precise, detailed sound stage. So the KEFs wouldn't be a disaster, obviously, and I think a lot of people would just love them. But for me, my preference is the Klipsch. So anyway, but I thought it was interesting about this, hooking up the wires and how that wasn't quite obvious out of the box. There's nothing, not some big flyer like read me first. There wasn't, any of that stuff. So there's kind of an assumption that the person buying these is already going to know all about that connector in the back. So, hey, thanks for watching the video. I appreciate any comments, suggestions, feedback. Appreciate the likes and shares and that type of thing. So let me know if you have any topics for future videos that you'd like to see, any product comparisons you'd like to see. I enjoy doing those. And take care and see you in the next video. You can probably hear in the video what I'm talking about. It's like you took this long cardboard shipping tube and you put a speaker in one end of it pointing out that way, and then you covered it up with some old remnant carpet, and then poured a old, cup of coffee on it to make it a little soggy. I don't know. That's what you'd end up with. I know I'm going to be probably getting some responses for that, but here's the thing. I don't know what the deal is with those.